Every person that I have ever met who has autism has one thing in common, and that is they are 100% human. I mean, they look like humans. They have a nose, eyes, ears, hair. You know, they got the fingers. They're us. They're one of us. Everyone with Asperger syndrome is 100% human. Everyone who is autistic is 100% human. Therefore, we conclude that the traits that we display as autistics are human traits. Now, the reason I say this is because often we as autistics are viewed as being something other than human. Now, I don't think any thinking person really believes that autistics are space aliens, so why do they say that? Why do they use terms like weird or odd, or back in the day they used the term queer more than they do now? But they would use these pejoratives to describe people who are not just autistic, but are different. Why do we do that? Where do we get that? And how can we understand that, all these traits that I display as an autistic person, they're just human traits. Now, they may not be traits that many other people display, but a group of us do display. They're still human. The fact that other people, for example, don't stem as much as I do or as much as someone else does, doesn't mean that stemming is not human. It just means that, well, they're missing this human trait. Seems like maybe they're missing out on something. Well, let's take a look at 7 points. Number one is this. We need to understand that life is competitive. You've heard the saying, something to the effect that the fittest survive, or strongest survival of the fittest is how they say it. Well, that's in a sense very true, that we tend to value those who are the most capable, the most competent. So if we go back to the days of the caveman, whenever that was, I'm not sure there actually was a day of the caveman, but let's say, 10,000 years ago, where competition for food was very important, and you were competing with other people, maybe other people in the tribe, maybe tribe against tribe. And what has changed? Well, nothing. There is a war going on in the world somewhere right now. I don't think there has ever been a point in time in human history when people were not fighting, competing with other people. Now, that's true across the board. It's also true in the classroom. Wherever you have a group of people, there is competition. And we tend to value those who are the most competitive, the best at competing, because we benefit from the guy in the tribe who's able to outcompete the mammoth, who's able to bring home the bacon. All right, so he's fighting with a pig, but whatever. So the people who are able to enhance our lives, it seems as if we are genetically programmed to value those people the most. And because of that, we see people who are successful and we tend to value them highly. We may be jealous of them, but we still value them highly. For example, athletes. Do you understand this? I don't, but why is it? It seems like everybody on the planet goes crazy on Super Bowl Sunday. Maybe I am the only person on the planet. Maybe I am a space alien. But I think I'm the only person who never really got into football. People banging into each other trying to gain 10 yards. They pay these people, the pros, countless millions of dollars to bump into each other. Basketball, okay, I'm a little more tolerant of basketball because I think it's fun. But you get the idea. We value these people who are very good at competing, and we pay them millions of dollars. Well, let's take that and let's bring it down to a social setting, and this is the problem that people with autism have, is we have that same value system in the classroom, at the workplace, at the social center, at the neighborhood level, at the church. People who are the best at competition, the people who are friendliest, kindest, who seem to be the most appropriate for the circumstance, those are the people we value the most. Well, the problem is people with autism, we seem to be missing some things that are considered to be valuable. Like, like eye contact, like the ability to socialize. We lack those things, but the missing of those things, the fact that they're gone or that they're minimized, that's a human trait. It's not a space alien. It's not that we're somehow flawed. It's kind of like a person. We may talk about this in a minute, but say a person who has blue eyes. You know what that means? That means they don't have brown eyes. So, is one better than the other? I mean, they're missing a trait, but they have another trait. So there may be a person who is physically blind. So they're better at picking up sounds. Does that mean that blindness is not a human trait? Actually, yeah. If you know a human who's blind, then blindness is a human trait. Being deaf is a human trait. And having it doesn't make you less human. But that's the way we think. Because a person doesn't make eye contact or is uncomfortable in social settings, or because they stem, somehow we think that somehow they're less human, they're not as valuable. And that is because life is a competition, and that puts us, number two, outside what I call the window of acceptability. I think we talked about this couple days ago. There is a thing called the Overton Window that every politician understands. Now, if you are a politician, or you should understand if you want to be successful, if you are a politician, you understand that there are some things that you do not talk about, ever, because it's not acceptable. That's just it. So they call this Overton's window because some guy named Overton talked about it. But it's also called the window of acceptability. And in social settings, we have a window of acceptability. For example, I have this horrible habit. I always have. I don't know if it's a habit or just a trait of analyzing people. I mean, visually staring at them, just studying them. People don't like you to stare at them. And I do it unconsciously. It's kind of like you're watching a movie, and you're seeing this actor on the screen, and you just look at them, and you're studying because, well, that's the show. That's what you're supposed to do. And I don't know if other Aspies do this or not, but I think they do. Well, I've actually heard some people say they do. And it's kind of like when you're in a social setting, it's kind of like you're watching a movie. And people are actors. And so you're just sitting there watching them. That bothers people. That is outside the window of acceptability. The fact that you cannot engage in a conversation with a group of people. You just don't participate. I mean, a group of people, how do they do this? How do they know to get up and walk away all at the same time? It's like a flock of birds in your backyard, and somehow something signals them and they all get up and fly away. It's not that they're spooked or scared. They just know it's time to go. You ever watch them flying around in the sky? Big flock of birds, and they just change direction. Why? How do they know? Instinct. Well, that's an instinct we don't have. I don't know how many times I've been in a group of people, and they just get up and move. I mean, it's kind of like one person gets up and they all get up. They don't think about it. They don't realize they're following social cues. To me, that's a flaw. But they say, for us, it's a flaw. It's something that's missing there. It's a deficit because we don't do what everyone else does. It's outside the window of acceptability. You're supposed to socialize well with people. And if you don't, you think you're space alien. But guess what? That trait where you don't socialize, well, because we're human, if we do it, then it's human. Number three is because it's typical, does it make it human? All right, so this is just kind of backwards what we just said. So we said if it's because it's not acceptable doesn't mean it's not human. Now we're saying because it is acceptable doesn't make it human where other things are not. For example, we don't say somebody with a high IQ is, well, they're not human because the great majority of people don't have an IQ of 200 or maybe 170. I don't know if you really know what someone's IQ is if it goes beyond 200, but so do we say these people are space aliens? Nah, I don't think so. But do they have a deficit? Yeah, they have a dumb deficit. They're not stupid like everyone else. Is there something wrong with them? No, that's just the way they are. So number four is this: flawed perceptions. That is to say that one of the challenges faced by people with autism is not only the way that others perceive us, and it is a perception, but it's also the way that we are taught to perceive ourselves. Now, if you go back to the earliest memories of your life, it is kind of fun to do that sometime. What is the earliest thing you can remember doing? I do that sometimes, go back, I don't know, maybe 2 years old, whatever. But did you feel like a space alien? Probably not. when you were a preschooler? Did you feel weird and left out? Maybe you did. Maybe you started being imprinted by the social cues of others. The point that I'm making is this perception that we are flawed is learned. I mean, if everyone else around us was an Aspie or had autism, yeah, we'd just fit right in, right? We just, we're just normal. And if someone didn't have it, we'd say, oh, that's a space alien, right? Nah, those perceptions are flawed. But again, going back to number one, life is competitive, and we tend to push aside people who are come across as a little bit different. They're in that valley of we don't really know if this person is totally human or not. I think the reason for that, maybe genetic, is when somebody is just a little bit off, seems to be a little bit off. It could be because they have a pathogen. They have a disease of some kind. And so nature has encoded us to stay away from those people. So it's kind of like, I hate to say that we're diseased, but they treat us as if we are diseased. So there we are, living in a world of rejection because we have blue eyes and red hair, and we're different from everybody else. But it's not always that. It's usually behavior. It's not the physical attributes that they see that is weird, but the way that, if you take a group picture of 50% of the people have autism and half of the people in the photograph do not, other than maybe the clothes they choose to wear, you couldn't tell. Well, if you just took their headshots, photographs of their faces, well, maybe their hairstyle may clue them in, or maybe the tape on the middle of their glasses may be a clue, but, okay, take off their glasses, and put a hat on all of them. You can't tell the difference by looking the person with Asperger syndrome from everybody else. So those perceptions are based upon almost exclusively behavior. So I like to use the examples of red hair and blue eyes because a small minority of people have those things, but we don't reject them because it's not a behavior problem. We tend to reject people we do reject people who don't look like us. I mean, that's universal. Who don't behave like us is a real problem. We don't accept those people. They're outliers. We push them out of the group. That is a problem, and for people with Asperger syndrome, but the emphasis that we're making is it's human. Everything about us is 100% human. Number 4 is flawed perceptions, again, not only of ourselves and others. And number 5 is environments are created to minimize those of us who have different behavior. Now, this could be cognitive behavior, it could be neurological behavior, or it could be physical problems. For example, when I was a kid growing up, we had streets, they had curbs on the streets and sidewalks, but there was no ramp at the end of the sidewalk for somebody in a wheelchair to go down. I mean, how many people did you know in a wheelchair? Virtually nobody, right? So why would you put a ramp in a sidewalk for this tiny, tiny, tiny minority of people who run around in wheelchairs? Roll around in wheelchairs. But today, every new sidewalk has a little ramp built into it. Good thing they do that, right? Because, I've had a physical condition. When was it? It's about a year ago, where I had a hematoma in my thigh, and man, that thing hurt. So I had to roll around in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk. It was just that painful. So I was kind of grateful for those little ramps, that go up or down, whichever direction you're going. But by and large, that's new. And throughout human history, making accommodations for people who were different physically, it just wasn't done because they were such a tiny minority. It seemed to be a wasted effort. Well, the same thing is true of people with cognitive distortions, perceived by neurotypical people, those of us with neurological differences, aka autism. The world is not intended to accommodate us, so environments are created to minimize us. And it's kind of hard not to notice that, particularly when you go to school, where social pressure is intense. And the so-called, quote, educators, unquote, probably should call them facilitators, Some of them are educators, some of them they're babysitters. But you go to school and you're expected to fit within that window that we talked about before, the window of acceptability. That is the way the educational system is designed. Now, they may have some politically correct exceptions for that, well, we're not going to talk about politics, but they do make some accommodations sometimes, but typically it's not for autistic people. And the reason is, I believe, if you were just personally to take a survey, stand on a street corner, maybe outside Walmart, if you don't want to stand on a street corner, and just ask people, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And they say, sure, go ahead. Do you know what autism is? Maybe your first question is, have you ever heard of autism? They probably say, yeah. Do you know what it is? Most people have no idea. They're clueless. So we live in a society that is ignorant of special needs. And I hate to say special needs because it has a negative connotation, but they're just not accommodating at all, particularly in the facilitation system, not the education system, the facilitation system. Number 6 is false diagnosis. Yeah, I talked about this a lot the other day. False diagnosis is, well, let me phrase it this way. The first person who ever got my diagnosis correct was when I went into a therapist and asked for one. Now, I have been autistic from day one. Okay, so I went to a therapist at age 65. So for 65 years, people have been observing my behavior. My lack of eye contact, a little bit of stimming, which I do, which is not much, my social distancing, inability to communicate verbally, trying to talk to somebody and my brain just scrambles and so my words scramble. All of those challenges, all those difficulties that come along with autism, with Asperger syndrome, people would diagnose those things. Maybe a better word is judge. And they were wrong. Again, I don't mean to repeat myself from an earlier video, but I think it belongs here. And that is, they will say your problem is you're aloof. Or maybe they'll say you're shy. Okay, that's a diagnosis. It's wrong. Well, maybe both could be true. You could be shy and you could be autistic, but that's not the correct diagnosis. Or they could say you're arrogant. It's kind of like aloof, right? Or they could say you just don't have your act together. Or maybe you're just not too intelligent. Or maybe you're just, did we say lazy? They may say you're just lazy. They have all kinds of diagnoses to tag you with, to label you with, judgment calls. And they're all wrong. The first person who ever got it right, I didn't even get it right. I knew there was a problem. I just didn't know what it was. But that was the therapist, first person, age 65, yeah. But then when people understood, Ken has autism. Ken is, he's autistic. He has Asperger syndrome, high-functioning autism. Then other people started getting it right because they could see, now we can see it. So the problem that we have is these false diagnoses include space alien. Yeah, this guy's just kind of weird. I had one guy tell me one time when I was in high school, I was just kind of walking around, just being me. And some guy asked me if I was on drugs, narcotics. Nah, I'm fine. So, okay, just wondered. Make sure I'm okay. He wasn't a jerk about it. He wasn't being rude. He just wondered if I was okay. No, I'm fine. This is just the way I am all the time. So, number 6, false diagnosis. The idea of doing the personal survey, where you stop people and ask them, do you know what autism is? The point of that is it's not going away. That false diagnosis will always, always, always be there, and that is one of the primary reasons why we find it so difficult to have to find and keep a job. Fortunately, I was able to hire myself. I was self-employed throughout most of my career. So, we did reasonably well. Didn't become phenomenally, successful or wealthy, but we paid the bills. So number 7 is to note that, and I think this is kind of important, is to note that masking changes perception. but it doesn't change the reality that we are who we are because it's neurological. You know, we didn't learn to be this way. Now we do learn things. Obviously, we learn to mask. We learn to try to accommodate those who will not accommodate us. We learn to stay away from people. We learn to be avoidant because they avoid us and we really have no choice. So we do learn things, but the underlying traits of autism and Asperger syndrome, those things are not going to change ever because it's who we are. There's no pill you can take. There's no shot you can take. There is, nothing you can do to change it. And quite frankly, I actually kind of like the way that I am. If other people don't like it, I see that as their problem, you know? I mean, if somebody bullies you, it's not because you are the problem. It's because the bully is the problem, right? So these flaws that we assign to ourselves because someone else is bullying us, and if we didn't have flaws, they wouldn't bully us. No, I think you got it backwards. The person who's doing the bullying, that is a person with the flaw, with the personality deficit. See those two rectangles on the screen? If you want to keep on talking, let's do it. Just click one of those two rectangles and we'll keep a conversation going. But if not, thanks for stopping by and we will see you all next time.